The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, "See everything we do." Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. We're here every day at 3 p.m. to show you samples of some of the great videos that we've produced. We have well over 500-600 videos, and we have some of the finest masters in the world, including Dawn Whitelaw. This one's called From Sketchscapes to Studios. It's a mouthful.
Hello, I'm Dawn Whitelaw, and I'm so pleased to be bringing you this video workshop. I think it will help you make stronger studio paintings. What I bring to you today is 52 years of teaching experience. And during those 52 years, I've been a passionate teacher, but I've also been an avid student, so I'm bringing you that information. I've also studied with a number of great painters who aren't teaching anymore, and I'm so anxious to share that information with you. So what we'll be doing today is to do a studio painting from a small oil sketch. Now along the way, we'll be talking about things like design and drawing and edges and value, and we're especially going to talk about how to finish up a painting. Because of my long history of being a teacher, I really used to love to give pop quizzes. Well, that's not possible in this format. Well, what I have done is I've sprinkled homework assignments all through the video, and it will give you a chance for a deeper and a more personal learning experience if you'll do the homework. Before we can get started on the painting, we need to come up with a good plan. So let's do that now. Long before the brush ever touches the canvas, there's a lot of work to be done. I like to have a plan. The better my plan, the better the painting will turn out. So I want to take you through that process of making a plan. Well, think about it. Why is this important? You've got all the information in that reference photo, and that's the problem. Nature presents us with way too much information. You've had this experience when you've been out to paint in a beautiful spot and everything is beautiful. The trees are beautiful, the light on the water, there's some ducks. You know the feeling. It reminds me of an all-you-can-eat buffet. And if you've had that experience and you're faced with the food, oh, I like this, I like this. Oh, I'll have a bite of this. And then you come up with a meal that's not very enjoyable. Well, I've applied that to painting. And I want to make a plan that's more like going into that all-you-can-eat buffet and maybe picking a protein and then seeing what sides go with it. So we want to center on the exact thing that most interests you about that scene. This is where you can put your personal stamp on the painting as well. We could both be at a lovely scene and be interested in different elements. For me, I like to start that process with words. I don't really try too hard, I just let the words flow. I recently started a painting and the words that kept coming to me were things like cinnamon toast. And then I discovered that that was influencing the warm color scheme that I needed for that painting. So just let the words flow. So let's look at the reference that I'll be painting from. It's a beautiful scene in the East Tennessee mountains. I'm from Middle Tennessee, and so I make it over to East Tennessee and am inspired by that landscape a lot. So when I arrived there on a cold November morning, chill in the air, the Smokies are called the Smokies because they're smoky. There's this haze. You know, I had coffee with me, I'd smell the coffee, and I think I could smell bacon cooking somewhere. And as the sun came over the mountain, things began to sparkle. There was a little frost on the ground that sparkled. Light hit the telephone wires, it hit some roofs, and it was just a magical moment for me when all of that light began to hit. So sparkle was one of my words, and haze was one of my words. Sort of a mysterious aspect to the haze and the Smokies that always hangs in the air. So although there were beautiful things there, that's what I decided to make the painting around. So now I've got a plan with words. So now what's the next step? So at this point, we've got the intent, why we're going to do this painting, what we're interested in. Still, how to get our idea on that canvas is a whole nother step. So I have recently been using small oil sketches to do that. Doing these small oil sketches, and I just do them in a craft paper sketchbook, is not original with me. The idea came to me from Scott Christensen. My twist is a little different on them that I'll tell you about in a little while. But they're very small and they're very quick. It just takes, honestly, about 15 minutes to do some of these sketches, and I've got books of them. They're essentially ideas for a painting. And honestly, they all don't turn out good. There's some in here that have a little sad face on them because they just didn't turn out right. But I can do those again because they're so quick. Well, why are they so small? This is the beauty of them, that in this small sketch you can only put down the important information. Like I said, that scene on the photograph is like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Too much information. In this little small format, you pare it down to what's important, and mainly what's important to you. So we could stand side by side and do a small sketch, and your sketch would look different than mine because you would have a different idea. I think that's the power of the sketch. So the first time I started to paint from one of these, I had a little sketch that I liked, and I thought, well, I think this will make a nice larger painting. I wasn't afraid at all because my plan was to use the sketch for a little while and then pull out the reference and to clean it up. This is a process I've used for commissioned portrait work. I do a small color oil sketch, and then I work from that to a certain point, and then I either have the sitter or photo reference. So I was not really afraid. But when I got into the process, what I found out is I really did not miss the photograph at all. That was a big surprise to me. And something was happening on the canvas. The painting had a little more energy and a little more intent than when I worked from the photo reference. So I got very excited, and I've pursued that. So my twist on these little color sketches is just to work only from them and not from the photo reference at all. Well, finally, I think we have our plan. We've got our why, we've got a how, we've got a way to get there. So let's get started on the drawing. Well, finally, we get to put something on canvas, so we're going to start the drawing process. But you need to know this before you start the drawing. The proportions of the sketch that you're working from and the actual canvas the proportions need to be the same. Now, it's obvious that you wouldn't take a sketch that was horizontal, long this way, and try to put it on a vertical canvas. But we need to be really exact about that. So at the end of the video, I have a demo how to actually make sure these proportions are exact using a proportion wheel. But just for now, just take my word that these are the same proportion. The other thing I would do that helps me is I mark the center of each edge of both the sketch and the canvas. It just helps with the drawing a little bit. So drawing for painting is a little bit different than doing a beautiful drawing. This is just a diagram. It's just placement. And honestly, it's just the bottom layer. We'll be drawing all through the process. This is just a layer so we can get started placing the elements. Speaking of that, I think the natural inclination is to come in here and draw the building. It's an identifiable subject. But fight that and see which lines are important. In the case in my drawing, a very important line is at the top where the mountains meet the sky. And I like to start drawing just with some straight lines first. I'm drawing with charcoal, so it's easily erased. No fear, just jump in here and make some lines. Those are two very main lines. Another main line would be probably where the road cuts in on the left side of the painting. So as I look back at the sketch, I see the road comes in about halfway between the bottom of my sketch and this center line. That makes it very easy to place here. Just checking myself. That's why I'm using charcoal. I can erase that a little bit. So this is another very important line. This comes up to where the side of the barn is. And I see on the sketch that the side of the barn is a little to the left of my center line, just slightly. So on the canvas, I'll locate my center line, and I know that the side of that barn comes in slightly to the left. I also see on the sketch that the peak of the barn is at my halfway mark in the sketch. So I find my halfway mark here on the canvas and know that the center peak of the barn is on this line. I'm going to erase a little bit of this line for the moment. Now I've sort of located where that center line is. I'm just going to take a look at the lines I have so far as if this were my entire painting, and see if I'm pleased with the placement and the angles of these lines. I'm going to make a little adjustment. Feel good about this line. This angle sort of counters it coming in. This line up. I'm going to erase the actual line for the side of my barn. Now I know where it is. Peak here. What I'm looking at is this angle compared to this. And I feel like it will be a better design if this angle comes up just a little bit. That gives me a nicer shape here. There's not a lot of detail that needs to be included in this drawing. I think one thing I've learned about drawing is that I would only draw things that are quite apparent in my subject. If there's a mysterious line on my subject, I probably won't draw it in. I know the moment I learned this principle, I was working with a student who was doing a drawing of her grandchild. And she said it just doesn't look like her. And so I went over and I helped measure, and things were accurate, but it was not a likeness. And then I took an eraser and I started erasing lines. And I erased one line and she said, oh, that looks more like her. With each erasure, the likeness began to appear. And it helped me realize that our eye can judge a drawing better if you only have the lines that are very apparent, drawn in, and you leave the others out. As you can see, drawing for me is very much a back and forth process. That's why I'm using charcoal. Easy to pull in and out. So I'm going to look back at the sketch and see where this center line, peak of the roof of the barn is in relationship to my center line here. Here's my center line. So I feel like the peak is a little different than where I had it. So I'm going to put that in. Because this line is not apparent, I'm going to take it back out. Let's see, what other information do I actually need in the drawing? I really don't see anything else of much importance. There's a small building I could indicate there. But I think what I need to do now is just look at the lines I have and see if I want to make any adjustment there. So this is what may be foreign to you. If you think of a drawing as being a replication of your subject matter, that's not where I'm going with this. I'm going with just the most significant marks, and I want to make sure they feel right on this canvas. So I feel good about the angles. I think this structure sits where it needs to. I don't need that mark. There's a little dark shape I want to indicate there. So I'm really, I think the only part of the drawing I need to address is this one little corner here, just to make that a better shape. I'm looking at this shape. I need a shape back here, but I really can just sort of make it work. I don't have to copy exactly what's in my reference, whether it's a sketch like I'm using or a photograph. Now these two shapes are becoming a little bit the same, so I'm going to make one of them a little larger. Now that little adjustment makes the design better to me. I'm going to revisit this line. So the principle here is that instead of adding more stuff to my drawing, I'm trying to make the stuff that's here better. Just adding more elements really confuses things. I think if this line bends down slightly, it'll be better. Okay, I'm going to try to look at this just by itself. It's looking for balance, for good movement. I want my eye to move through. I want to keep that open. This shape moves all together. In other words, this shadow, this structure, and this mountain all become one piece. Well, that's not a lot of information, but I think that's really all I need to hang the painting on. So I have drawn with charcoal. The minute I start to put a wash over this, which will be my next step, the charcoal's going to disappear. And then I have to draw it all over again. So to avoid that, I'm going to go over these lines with something that the solvent won't dissolve. And this is just pastel pencil. You can find a lot of different things that will do this job. So I just am going to hit these lines a little stronger. Now I'm doing a little editing as I go along too. It's just the nature of this. As you go along, you might see a little correction, something to make it a little prettier, a little more interesting. Now, the lines will dissolve a tiny bit, but there will be enough there for me to see. I think I want to add maybe both sides of that little road. So that's the end of the drawing. The next step will be to put a wash over the canvas to separate the values. Let's do that now. So we have the drawing on the canvas and we're ready for the next step. You may have noticed that this canvas has a color on it. It's not white, and I want to explain that just a little bit. What I have done is I have stained this canvas ahead of time. It is bone dry. Makes it much easier to work on. And so let me just tell you briefly how the stain was done. I took some colors. I couldn't even tell you what colors they were. I know I didn't use any white. And I just mixed them together and thinned them with Gamsol solvent and used a paper towel and just rubbed it on till I got an even tone. I was actually trying for something similar to the brown paper sketch pad I had, just to make the process of transferring this image to this image a little easier. I missed the color a little bit, but that's okay. The main thing is it's dry and it just takes the white of the canvas away. Now, I'll have to say, there are many beautiful paintings in the world done on white canvas. There's nothing wrong with working on white. I just find this a little easier to work with this value. It just makes the process easier. My palette is not white, it's a toned value. My sketch is on a piece of paper that's toned, and so it's logical to have the tone on the canvas before I start. Okay, here's a homework assignment for you. If you don't know whether you would prefer a stained canvas or a white canvas, this is an easy way to find out. You would take any canvas board or scrap of canvas, divide it in half, stain one half like I have described, let that stain thoroughly dry, and then do a painting on each half. At the same time, you would do the drawing on the toned canvas and on the white canvas at the same time, and then proceed to paint on both sides, same subject, same time. At the end of that, you'll have an idea of which was easier for you. I think it's a bit of time that you can invest to make a big decision about whether you want to work on a white canvas or a stained canvas. So I'm ready now to put a wash over this and to divide this into two values. Okay, so here are my materials for the next step. I have not my full palette out, I just have a couple of tubes of paint. And with my palette, these two colors work very well for the next step, but you're not limited to these two colors. I just need something that's darker than the stain of my canvas. The two colors I have out are ultramarine blue and transparent red oxide. So I'm just going to put a small amount of each one of these out. There's my ultramarine blue. And here is the transparent red oxide. I know from practice that these two colors will make a nice gray tone when they're mixed together, and so that would be very good for me to use for the next step. I also have some Gamsol solvent, some paper towels, and a good sized brush. So the only thing I need to think about here is which parts of this canvas are in the light family and which parts are in the dark family. I'm going to just put paint on the parts of the canvas that will be in the dark family. And it's pretty clear cut with the scene I'm painting. So I'm putting out a small amount of the Gamsol on the palette, and I'm just going to pick up a little of each of the colors and mix it together until I'll have something a little darker than my stain. Well, I'll just try it out. I don't know that I need it quite that dark, so I'm going to add a little more solvent. Well, you know what happens when I'm going to add more solvent. It's going to get a little more runny. I think I can work with that. So there again, I'm just going to fill in everything except the light family. You remember when I used that pastel pencil to go over my drawing? This is why, because this is totally dissolving that charcoal. Get a little more solvent and just make a little more of this mixture of these same two colors. I would not use white in this step because you want it to be transparent so you can see your drawing through. This is the easiest part of the whole painting, so enjoy it. Get just a little more. If the color varies a little bit, it's going to be okay. Yeah, varied the color right there. It's just fine. This is not real scary on this landscape, but sometimes I have drawn a portrait of a family of 3, and it's a little scary when I start covering up my drawing. So I'm going to take a paper towel and just smooth this out a little bit. I'm not going to press hard, just get the excess liquid off. So right now I've painted everything one shade darker except the sky and the road, and I even got out of my lines. Yeah, I always had a great deal of difficulty with coloring books. I just couldn't stay in the lines, and so some of that carries over. But I'm taking a paper towel with just a little clean solvent on it, and I can clean out any areas that I happen to cover up. So that back road is probably small enough that I can leave it out. I'm going to pick up one more light. So I've got a big light, a bigger light than this light at the top, and a medium-sized light, and I'm going to find a small light over in this area, which gives me a nice balance. So what's the advantage of doing this? For me, it's extremely helpful to check my design this way. I can kind of take a look and make sure that everything's not balanced, that I don't have too much weight on one side of the canvas or the other. In some cases, it will help me check my drawing. This drawing is not very complicated, so it's not a problem here, but it's mainly design. And as I'm looking at this, I sort of feel like I would like another bit of light over here. I'm not too sure exactly what that might be. And I think these two are so much the same size that I'll get rid of one of them. Let me just clean up that shape a little bit. Okay, that's step one. So this is called a no-tan, where I've divided this canvas into a light family and a dark family. Sometimes it's helpful to add a third value, a darker value. And so I'm going to add a darker piece in now. The reason it's helpful on this particular canvas is this big, giant, dark thing I have is all interconnected, and I need to break it apart a little bit. So I'm going to add, I'm using the same two colors. I'm just not adding solvent this time. I'm letting there's still solvent on this surface. So I'm just putting the paint, I'm going to take a little of that off my brush. I'm just putting the paint onto the wet canvas, and it makes a darker shape. So that shape sort of helps me define a side of this structure. I don't need too much paint. I don't need a thick layer. That's why I'm picking up paint and then I'm wiping off a little. And that's something that you sort of can get a feel for. I am thinking this is sort of a bigger dark shape. This one is a smaller dark shape. I'm just using pure paint into the solvent that's already on here. And I'm really not trying to describe an object. I'm just making an interconnected shape. But I want it to be a nice shape, so I'm going to spend a little time. So this dark thin, I think would travel this. I'm going to connect this dark. I said this was my biggest dark, but I think I'm going to make an even bigger dark on this side. Picking up a little more paint, some of the blue, some of the transparent red oxide, and I kind of love that sound. It's kind of a scritch. I'm in a studio building with 5 other artists, and I love it when I can hear them in their studio making this sound because I know what they're doing. So this becomes my bigger dark, sort of a soft edge here. This is a medium-sized dark. And I've got several options for some smaller darks to sort of balance that out. One could be, let's see how that sort of visually connects them. Makes the flow a little more interesting. So if I have that here, I might want to put a dark in here. And there's some darks on my sketch for me to choose from. I'm careful to make this one a different size from the other darks. Okay, let me think about this dark. Let me take it out. If I were to erase that dark with a clean paper towel, I would have a white spot. What kind of a white spot? So if I erase it with this paper towel that already has some color and solvent on it, it doesn't make a white spot. It gets me back to where I was. Let me think. Dark, then kind of moving this way. I think I just need something small down here. This shows me what the design's going to look like without any color, without any precise explaining of what the things are. If you're not accustomed to working this way with a no-tan, I'm going to give you some homework. So here's your homework assignment. Instead of doing this with paint, you can just get a sketch pad and a pencil and an eraser and some reference material. And look at your reference material and just make a sketch where you divide your sketch just into areas with pencil on it and areas with paper. And you may have to go back and forth using the pencil, using the eraser until you get a pleasing 2-value light, dark pattern. And then go back in and see if you can find some slightly darker shapes from the reference. And there again, you don't have to put all the dark shapes that you see in the reference. Just kind of pick and choose and see what makes a nice pattern on your canvas. So I think we're a little afraid of design because there's so many rules. Don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. It gets very complicated. But working with this simple no-tan pattern does a wonderful thing. It unlocks a designer that's in you that's sort of natural. You have sort of a natural sense of balance where the things seem interesting yet stable. And if you, I hate to say this, but if you sort of disregard the rules and just let your intuition work on shapes, you will become a better designer. So that's what your homework is designed for. At this point, we have the drawing done. We have some paint on the canvas, but I think this is a good time to look at the materials I use. They're not many. So here are the colors of paint I use: titanium white, cadmium, yellow medium, pyrrole red, a synthetic red, ultramarine blue, transparent red oxide. Occasionally, I will put out ivory black or Prussian blue. Not a lot of tubes, not a lot of fuss. I also have a palette knife here, and I use this for mixing paint, sometimes to take paint off the canvas, but not really to apply paint. I have an assortment of brushes. I have two different kinds. I have bristle brushes and synthetic brushes. The bristle brushes are a little stiffer, and they are good in the beginning stages of the painting. And once the canvas gets covered with wet paint, then the synthetic brushes are very nice to go on top of the wet paint. And I'll be explaining a lot more about how to use the brushes as we go along. This next material, it's pretty exotic. I hope you can find this. It's cardboard. I cut these strips and find that they just break up the brush marks sometimes. So they're a lot of fun to use, and you know, they are readily available and pretty cheap as well. I have some other tools that I use. Sometimes there's a brayer, a thing called a knockdown knife that's used for drywall, that I'll show you exactly how they're used, but they're just a way to manipulate the paint in some point in the process. I also have solvent to clean my brushes. I have used a little solvent in the painting at this point to thin the paint, but after this point I won't be adding any solvent to the paint. The thing you might miss is medium. I don't have any. I'm not against medium, I just don't need it the way I work. And also the paints I use don't require a lot of medium. They're very soft in texture and flow freely, so I don't have any medium. The canvas I use is a single primed alkyd linen, and I have glued it to a piece of gator board because I like working on the rigid support a little better than a stretched canvas. So that's the list of my materials. The next thing will be, how do I lay out this limited palette? A lot of painters use a limited palette, just the three primaries. And that is what I use, but I set it up a little different. And so I'm going to go through an explanation of that. Let's get some paint out here. So I put my paints in the same place every time. It just makes it easier for me. It's like a piano keyboard to me, and I want everything to be in the same place every time. So I start out with the white. The next color I put down is my yellow. Yeah, I see people put paint out in their workshops, and you may be thinking that is an enormous amount of paint. More than likely, I will use all of it. I'm going to skip a space and then put my red and my blue down. So here's my ultramarine blue. And this is the one color that deviates from the traditional primary palette. But I found that this transparent red oxide really mixes well with all of my colors. So I put it out every time, but I put it beside my blue at the end. So here comes the twist. I'm going to mix the secondary colors. I primarily paint out of the secondary colors, so they're very important to me. So to make my orange, which is the first secondary color, I'll put out another good amount of the yellow and a very small amount of the red. This red is very strong. You can see the ratio there. And so then I'll just use the palette knife to mix that together. What I'm looking for here is a color that's just between my yellow and my red. Because I've done this a whole lot, I know that a lot of yellow and a little bit of red will get me there. So I want that thoroughly mixed. So I'll get the excess. I can mix a little more, I think, here. I still see some streaks of yellow and red in there. I'll wipe off my knife so I'll transfer to this next color. So now I have yellow, orange, and red. My next secondary color I mix will be a purple. So I'll put out an amount of blue, and then I want to match that amount with the same amount of red. So I'm going to mix these two together. And the purple is just, I want it visually halfway between the red and blue. As I'm mixing this, it looks like it leans a little bit to the red. So I'm going to add a little more blue. I may have been a little off on my first mixture. So just put a little more blue in there. I've used this limited palette for decades, and I love using it, but if I just put out the red and the yellow and blue, I think it's a little bit difficult to work with. So the game changer for me has been to mix these secondary colors. Now that purple feels more like halfway between my red and blue. Now I'm going to mix the third secondary color, which is a green. I'm going to scoot this guy over a little bit. I didn't leave myself quite enough room here. So for the green, equal amounts of blue and of yellow get me there. So with a clean palette knife, I mix that together. Are you thinking that's a lot of trouble to mix those secondaries? I get that, but they have been so extremely helpful to me in mixing colors to have. I'm willing to do it. Every time I paint, I mix these three secondaries. As experienced as I am using the primary palette, I would not put the yellow, red, and blue out and start to paint. I mix these secondaries. Now I would like to find secondaries in a tube that work for me, but honestly I've found these ones that I mix I like a lot better, so I'm willing to mix them. I have a drawer full of green tubes of paint because I've tried to find a green that works as well as my mixed green and I have not found it. So this is what happens every time. It really takes a minute if you're not having to talk and explain it to somebody to get the secondaries out. And you will see as I start to paint that most of my mixtures come from the secondary piles. So at this point, I have my limited palette set up. What we have on the palette now, white, 3 primary colors and 3 secondary colors that I mix, plus transparent red oxide, which comes from a tube. The mixtures and proportions I gave you are specific to the colors and the brand I used. But you can set up the same sort of palette with any other brand. And so let me tell you how to do that. So here's your homework. Go find that big stash of paint tubes you have. We all have one. And pick out a red and a yellow and a blue. And you can set up your own primary palette. But you're looking at, you've got 4 yellows, so which one do I use? You want to pick a yellow that makes a really good orange and a really good green. Well, most yellows make a really nice orange. That's not too hard. But making that green is a little trickier, so you might try your yellow with ultramarine blue. That's kind of a common blue that everybody has, so I would use that as my blue. So take each of your yellows, mix a little bit of it with the ultramarine blue, and see which one of them comes up with a green that you think you would like to use. You don't want such a scary green that it doesn't relate to anything in nature. Look for something that's sort of a natural green. So now you have your yellow and your blue, and you're looking at your reds. You've probably got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, who knows. What you want is a red that makes a good orange, fairly easy. You would mix your red with your yellow, but then you need a red that makes a nice purple, and that's a little more difficult. So there again, take your red and your ultramarine blue and experiment with each of the reds you have and see which one of them makes the nicest purple. And then you'll have the limited palette set up like I do. Now, it seems like trouble. I understand that. But if you've ever tried to use a limited palette with just red, yellow, and blue, it can be difficult. It's difficult for me, and I've done this for decades. So the secondary colors, the orange, the purple, and the green, make it so much easier to mix colors. So I hope you'll try using a limited palette. Again, use your own colors, set it up the way you want to, and enjoy. Well, I'm ready to do the block in, finally. But all the work, all the prep will pay off. This is my favorite part of the painting process because I get into the color. And the block in goes fairly quickly, and I get the canvas covered quickly, and it's sort of free and easy and really a lot of fun. But what it gives you at the end, this canvas will resemble the little sketch. I'm going for the feeling of the little sketch. So oil painters are pretty safe always starting with the darks. You don't have to, but that is a good place to start. So that's where I'm going to start for this painting. So I have my darks marked on the canvas with just a generic sort of a brownish color. And it's darker than anything on the canvas, but I don't know if it's exactly the value I want. So I'm going to decide that. In my dark, I want to be a little bit on the greenish side. So I'm going to start with some green, which is not dark enough on its own, and add a little purple and blue to it. I'm just mixing with the brush at this point. And in the dark stage, I usually don't put any white in, and you probably wouldn't if you're making a dark color. So I'm looking for something that's dark, but not the darkest thing I can make. That might be, looking back at my sketch, I might want that a little bit lighter, so I'm just going to add a little more green to lighten it. We often think that if we lighten something, the thing to do is to reach for that white paint. And really all you have to do is reach for something that's a little lighter than what your mixture is. So I'm looking a little bit at the shape on the sketch, but I'm also just making a nice shape. I'm not putting on a lot of paint. I'm using a bristle brush and sort of spreading it sort of thinly at this point. Now I think I'll shift the color of the dark a little bit. So I'm going to add a little more purple. Okay, you know, it took me a minute to mix those secondary colors, but now I'm so glad I have them because it makes mixing these colors so much easier. So I'll shift this dark a little. So I'm not cleaning out my brush. I'm not doing anything. I'm just adding other colors to it. Thinking about shape. So I'm going to come down to a dark I have here, and I'm going to add a little bit of the transparent red oxide to the mixture. Let's see, where I want this dark in here, not too big, and maybe sort of connect out a little bit. As you see, I'm not covering up all of my darks, and that's not a problem. I'm just restating them in a little bit better way. I kind of like that dark over there, and this color will work fine. So I'm going back to my pile of darks, and I'm just adding some blue, and then I'm going to just very lightly take the dark from this shape up into this shape. I'll put a color on top of this, but I want that dark underneath so that this shape sort of fades into this dark shape. All right, let's see if I have addressed all the darks I put in the no tan, maybe except that little guy. I think I'm going to leave it just as is. It feels pretty good. And well, that was fairly easy and straightforward. You know, it's like in oil painting, it's just a layer. That's why oil painting is so good. You can just go over something along the way. So the next piece I'm going to put in is this big piece. Let me show you on the sketch. There's a big blue mountain which sort of drifts into a barn and down into the cast shadow from the barn. That's a huge section of my canvas, so I want to put that piece in. So I'm going to just gather up with a palette knife what's left of my dark, because I may need it again, and I'm just going to park it over to the side. I'm going to put this brush aside as well, because if I need to paint the darks again, I'll come back to that. And I'll just pick up another brush. I'm just using some bristle brushes. Let's see, I think I can use the biggest one I brought, which is this one. I'm going to need a lot of paint this time, so I'm going to mix it with a palette knife. When I mix the darks, I mixed it with a brush. I didn't need as much paint, so I have a good bit of blue. So I'm just going to lighten it with white. It's still too dark. It's best to add the white slowly. It's almost like a seasoning or something. I want to get it added and mixed in and take a look at the value. So what I'm saying is I'm mixing blue and white till it's the same degree of darkness that's in my sketch. And when I think I'm getting close, I actually can put some of this color on the back of my palette knife, even though it's the wrong color, and hold it up to my sketch. So I need to add a little more white. I think I have, probably a good tablespoon, if you're a cook, of color mixed up here, and I will need every bit of it. I think I'm getting close to the value. That means I'm getting close to how dark or light I want this. I still don't have exactly the color I want, but I'm going to just test it. I think I'm going to test it here against that dark. Now that value seems good, but the color seems a little too bright, so I'm going to tone it down just a little bit. And I think the best choice on my palette for that is the transparent red oxide. The reason I added transparent red oxide to my palette is it mixes beautifully with all the colors I have. So as I added that color, I darkened my mixture just a little bit. So I think I'm going to add just a little bit of white back into it. There again, relax, it's just the bottom layer. I have to tell myself that. So I'm going to get a good bit of paint and just start filling in this shape. You hear that noise again. That means I'm pushing down on my brush with a lot of pressure and spreading this paint thinly. So a lot of painters like to put solvent or medium in this to make the paint spread this thinly, but I find that if I just push down on my brush, I can get a nice thin layer without the addition of solvent or medium. Now, if you like to use solvent and medium, that's fine. This is just what works better for me. I'm going to do this whole painting wet into wet. So for me, it's a little easier if the paint doesn't have a lot of liquid in it. So I'll see a little bit of the lock-in peeping through, and that's okay. Yeah, you could actually use a larger brush for this in packing to come do this demo. I just didn't get a bigger one packed. But in my home studio, I would probably have a little bit larger brush. So during the process of painting, I will go back into this shape, add more color, change the value. I just have to get something down to look at this point. Oh my goodness, I crept into the barn. There was no line there. That's exactly what I meant to do. Because one of the beautiful things about the scene is how the colors in the mountains sort of flowed through the shadow side of the barn down into the cast shadow. So now I've crossed over into this shape. I noticed from my sketch that the blue shifts just a little bit there. So I'm going to take with a brush and a corner of my blue, and I'm going to lighten just the tiniest little bit, and I'm going to add some purple. I picked up a little red just to intensify the purple. Okay. That is just a very, very subtle shift, but that is what I want. So let me go back. I'm going to pick up the original color that I was using. Hey, I know the barn ends there, but I want this all to flow together. So first, let me go back to my little bit lighter color with the purple. Being a little more careful of this edge. drifts down into this cast shadow. Let me open that back up, connect. So when it comes to the shadow, it gets a little darker. So I'm going to take the same blue mixture I started with, and I'm going to kind of round it up. I've gotten it spread everywhere. And I need to add something that'll darken it a little bit, so I'm going to add a little blue. And it seems to be cast toward green, so I'm going to add a little green. I'm just mixing this with a knife because I've already got a lot of paint on this brush. Even though I have a lot of paint on this brush, I can go back and just add this new color on top. Let me just check for the value. Yeah, it's about the same as this. I think I can modify this color a little bit. I'm going to go to the orange and to the purple. If you're paying attention, you're seeing that I'm using these secondary colors for most of my modifications. Occasionally I will go to the yellow, red, and blue, but mainly the modifications come from these secondary colors. And that's what makes laying that palette out the way I prescribed so helpful. So this looks very blue here. It looks green on my palette. I'm going to trust my palette. The reason it looks different here is because of the color that's on this tone on my canvas. But I'm looking on my palette. It looks exactly the color I need. I say exactly, pretty close, because I'll probably change it a bit. But I'm going to trust my palette. So before I started putting this color in, I was working on a stained canvas, and then I put another tone on it. Let me show you one reason why. I'm going to take my light mixture, my lightest blue mixture that I've made, and I'm going to put it on the paper towel. And it looks very dark here. It looks much darker on the paper towel than it looks on my canvas. And so if my canvas were white and I had put this color up, I probably would have lightened it. So working on the stained canvas makes it easier for me to get my values right. And where else does that color repeat? So one thing that may be a little different how I work is I'm sort of working in not just a small area, but in a bigger area. And I attribute that to early training. A young child in the 50s, paint by number sets were very popular. And, you know, my parents were all over that because it kept all of me and my siblings, you know, quiet and out of trouble for a while. But they had this rule that they wouldn't give you another color till you had found all the spots where the color that you had was located. So I had to find all of the little bits of number 1 color before they would open up the little vial of number 2 and let me have that. I think that rule was probably put in place because of my unruly brothers. But anyway, that was the rule. So what it made me do is carry it over into my painting. Now when I have a color on my brush, I look everywhere on the canvas and see where else can I use that color before I move to a next one. This does 2 things. It begins to knit the painting together. You start to create a harmony. And it's also very efficient because maybe I've used this color and then I moved on and I see I need it again, then I would have to remix it. But if I do it now, it speeds the process along. So let me see if that's everywhere I want this type of color. Even though there's modifications in it, if you look at it on my palette, you'll see that they're all very close together. There's a piece here that's very similar to everything I've done, maybe just a little bit lighter. So I'm going to put that in. I'm going to go back to this piece, add a little more white and a little more purple. Hey, we've gotten a lot of the canvas covered. And that is a goal here. Covering the canvas up, I can sort of see where the painting's going without a lot of time being put in. Okay, I think I've got everything that relates to that blue color, so I'm going to put that brush aside, and I'm also going to gather up this color and put it on the edge of my palette here. So I'm looking at my next big piece of color, and if you will look at the sketch, there's this lovely soft green that was so beautiful to me in the scene. When you look at the photo reference for the scene, the color is quite different than in my little sketch. But honestly, the colors in my sketch are so much more like what I saw than what the camera recorded. So I have to be aware of that. I think I'm going to do one more thing before I move to that green. This is a brayer used in printmaking. And I learned to use this in my oil painting from Larry Moore, who's a wonderful teacher. And this is just fun. This helps in a couple of ways. Sort of begins to make some interesting edges. But I'm doing it for also another reason. There's, because of the lights, there's spots of glare on this. And this just helps eliminate that. You say, well, you went over some of your darks. I know, it's just the bottom layer, it's okay. I'm also gonna soften up that line. You know, in my studio, there's a child's drawing that I bought for $1 years ago. And I bought it because it just, you could tell she was having so much fun when she drew it. And so on the days in the studio where things are a bit of a struggle, I look back at that drawing and say, hey, you got into this because it was fun and you liked it. Don't lose that. And I really don't ever want to do that. I'm cleaning this off so I can use it again. Okay, I think I'm going to mix that green with a palette knife, because I will need a good bit of it. Now I'm just pulling my green off the palette as is. Okay. The reason I'm doing this is I'm seeing I need this green to be a little bit lighter than the blue. And if I put some of the green here, it's a little darker. So my best color for lightening that is just going to be some white. I think I better pull out some more green. Did you think when I was putting out these piles of paint they were way too big? Well, you can see me using them up. Okay, just added a little more white. Again, I'm going to check the value. It's getting a little lighter than the blue shape. I'm going to put some on the back of the knife, and then I'm going to hold it up next to the sketch. Well, there you go. It's a little too dark. I'll have to remember to get that blob off of my sketch. So I'm going to lighten it up just a little more. Now I like the value of this. In other words, I like how light or dark it is, but the color seems to be a little too vivid for the scene I'm painting. So I want to modify this color a little bit. You know, our natural inclination is to make a color bright so that the painting will be strong. But this painting is not about that bright light. It's about a very soft light that causes some sparkle. But the light doesn't light up the grass like sunshine shining on grass in the summer. So I'm not gonna make this bright. I'm gonna make it quieter, a little grayer. So I'm adding just a tiny bit of purple. Let me get that thoroughly mixed, and I'll check it again. Yeah, it's just you probably can't even see the shift. I can. Let me think, do I want to leave it there? Do I want to take it? I'm going to gray it down just a tiny bit more with a little bit more purple. Now, because the purple I'm adding is dark, I may have to add a little more white to compensate for that. Now that's looking good, and I will put a little more white into it. And it seems like I have obsessed over this color, and I have taken some care with it. But I do remember that it is a bottom layer, and I can adjust it. So it goes. There are some beautiful variations in this green shape in my little sketch that I will get to, but right now I just want to kind of generally put this color in. And if some of my background stain shows through, it's quite all right. You hear that noise again, so you know that I'm putting a lot of pressure on my brush. Sort of scrubbing the paint in. As I've put this green in, it changes the way that the blue shape looks. That's what is so interesting about painting. Every color you add, every value you add changes everything. That's one reason I like to get sort of the general painting on the canvas before I do any specific things. For instance, I could, let's say if I started painting the mountain and I started putting all the trees in, and then I decided the whole mountain was too dark. Done a lot of work for nothing. So this block in is just a way to look at the painting as a whole. Well, that color really helps my other color. Okay, because of my paint by number training, I'm just kind of looking to see this color go somewhere else. And there is some light hitting some of these trees that's not exactly this color, but it's kind of this value. So I'm going to put it in and see how this sort of begins to get some movement. This color is just not in this shape like a coloring book. Color kind of escapes and moves other places. There's a value up here that is like this value, the lightness and darkness same. Might not be exactly that color, but I'm going to move that color there. If you can get yourself to do that and move the color around and realize that, you know, the outlines are not like fences to hold the color in, I think you will begin to enjoy painting. on a different level. Hello, I'm Dawn Whitelaw, and I want to welcome you to my video workshop. In this video, you're going to learn how to deal with the enormous amount of material that nature presents to you and learn how to sift it down to make the painting very personal. You're going to learn how to give the painting a lot of energy by using a small sketch instead of a photographic reference. You're going to learn things about color. You're going to learn things about value and edges. I've tried to include some unique things in the video. One element are the bonus sections at the end, and the other thing is because I'm a teacher at heart, I've included homework. The thing that would help students paint better is to paint more, I believe. I know that people are limited in their time, but there's nothing that can take the place of miles of canvas. I really didn't start painting until my mid-30s, and I got into it in a very unusual way. I'd painted a little bit, but really my heart was graphic design. But I went to a museum and saw a painting by painter Cecilia Beau, and it stopped me in my tracks. I grew up in a small town, did not see a lot of original art except my mom's. And this painting, I didn't know that paint on canvas could look that way. And I decided at that moment that that's what I wanted to do. I would describe my style of painting as evolving. It's this moving, changing organism. If I had to give you a general statement about my style of painting, I would say that I'm more interested in how things feel than exactly how they look. When we start to paint, we're so obsessed with making a thing look like a thing and getting in all the little parts. That's part of the learning process. But as you progress as a painter, you're painting because you have some sensitivity to how beautiful things are. You start to be more concerned with how they feel, how you emotionally react to them. I really have never been put in a box of being a landscape painter or a portrait painter. The subjects are all the same to me. They're just shape and color and feeling. So I paint everything. On a daily basis, I see random things that I want to paint all the time. I've been painting for a while, and you would think that I would get tired. People ask me sometimes, don't you need a break or don't you get tired? I stay inspired and motivated all the time, and that's the truth. I paint a lot. I love painting, but I honestly think my real work here on the earth is to inspire others. I connect with people. I love talking to an artist, no matter what their level, and trying to find out what they're interested in, what they want their paintings looked in. I love that connection, and I love helping them on their journey.
Well, that video is called From Sketchscapes to Studio, and it's from Dawn Whitelaw. You can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. Remember, we have a special discount code on that video today only, and it is found in the comments section. Now, let's get to know Dawn Whitelaw. She is a true master. Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Plein Air Magazine. Today, I'm pleased to have Dawn Whitelaw with us. Dawn is a legend in the art world, and I'm honored to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Does that make you a little uncomfortable when somebody calls you a legend?
Yes, I translate that as I must be old, and I'm good with that.
Well, when did this painting thing start for you?
I really came to the party late. I was about 35 before I really became serious about painting, really interested in it. But honestly, I was almost 50 before I had the time to give it.
So what was taking up your time?
Well, family, like so many people. And family's important, and you want to do a good job there. But paintings, sometimes you can get a little accomplished, but it's not till you get those long stretches of interrupted, concentrating time that you can really start to develop.
You know, I think that's an interesting thing to talk about because I've watched this happen with so many painters. we see a lot of people who are part-timers
Yes.
who then become full-timers, and their work just starts amplifying and getting better. And
Absolutely.
how long does it take typically, if somebody's been painting part-time for a while and then they go full-time, is there a certain period of time that you think they need to put in?
I don't think I can give a time to it, but I'll tell you what I do believe, it happens quicker than I would think. Once you have that uninterrupted time to concentrate and really devote to the painting, you get better quicker.
Yeah. So how long had you been painting kind of as a hobby or just dabbling in it before you decided to go full-time in?
Well, I painted some in college, and I really like design and advertising. They used to call it commercial art. Do you remember that term?
No, I'm not young enough or old enough to remember that.
Yeah, it was a whole.
Of course I remember.
A whole different era, and that I was really interested in that, but I painted some.
Yeah.
And at one point, I saw a painting that I didn't understand that a painting could really be like that and look like that. At that moment, I decided this is what I want to do.
What was that painting?
It was Cecilia Bowes' Man with a Cat,
Yeah.
painting for Uncle Henry Drinker. And it literally stopped me in my tracks, and I really thought I might faint. I didn't know anything like that existed. It was so, my uncle painted professionally, my mother painted, and this painting was different. It had this vitality.
I think most of us who do what we do have one of those somewhere in the back of our head, sometimes
Yes.
a couple of them that really turn the lights on and wake you up.
Exactly. And it was that for me. And so I pointed in that direction, but it was really almost 50 before I had day after day after day.
I had a very famous artist tell me one time that if one started late, they could not become a good artist. And you have certainly blown that theory completely out of the water, because I say that you're a legend, and I mean that sincerely. You are extremely well known, both as a landscape painter but also as a portrait painter, and have received all the accolades, all the awards. You teach a lot of people. You are a prominent part of the Portrait Society, and so you've really done a lot with your life since you started. So I think you've disproven that theory.
Well, I think that time between the time I knew that's what I wanted to do and I could actually do it, I just had this pent-up desire. When I wasn't working at painting, I was thinking about it, and so then once I got the time, I was pretty relentless in my effort and how I could dive into it. Now, of course, I had to have the support of my family and my husband to do that, which I could not have done, but everybody in my life was all behind it. That made a huge difference.
Sure it does. It makes a huge difference in so many different levels
Absolutely.
emotionally. And if you had to do it all over again, or if you were coaching someone who was at maybe that time in their life when they're saying, okay, the kids are gone and I can do this, or in some cases they're just going to say, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
What would you do differently than what you did that would perhaps help you speed the process, the adoption, or is there anything that can be done?
I may have been able to start earlier, but at 35, I brought something else to the table. I brought life, what I'd learned about living and being a person and being in the world. So I brought something a little more complex to the canvas than a 17 or 18-year-old can bring. And they can get proficiency with materials, but somehow having that life and learning how important every day is and how to love people, I think it translates to the canvas, so I don't regret my late start.
So how do you bring emotion into a painting? Because that all of that life experience is going to translate into that emotion, and I can't imagine there's technique that puts it there.
No, I don't think you can help but put it there. I really don't.
It's just part of who you are.
Yeah, you know, there have been times in my life where things have happened. A significant person has died or a significant person was born, and I feel that reflected in my art. I can look back at the paintings done during that period, and they have a certain feel to them. I think we're sensitive when we bring that. We bring that to the canvas.
You know, I'm a writer, and I'm also a painter, and sometimes when there's a maybe not catastrophic, but there's something significant both on the joy side or on the
Yes.
on the loss or the serious side of things. My first instinct is to either write or paint.
Yes.
Do you
Yes.
find yourself doing the same thing?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I think it comes more precious in a way. I think I have pent up feelings, and that's just such a great way to process that.
Interesting. Well, I'm thinking of some moments. There's an artist we both know. I won't embarrass him right now, but he texted me a photo the other day of his father was dying in the hospital. And the first thing is he told me, my dad's dying in the hospital. I'm sitting with him probably for the next few days. I said, go home and get your paints.
Absolutely.
And he said, what? Why? And I said, just do it. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
he did a portrait, and it was one of the, and he's very well known, very famous, and it was one of the best things he's ever done because you could really read the love in that portrait.
Absolutely. It's such an opportunity to express those things.
And then the other best part of it is his dad survived, had a big birthday, and so he did a painting at the birthday party too.
Oh, that's a great story.
So how do you juggle this world of landscapes and portraits, because they're both quite a bit different, are they not?
Not to me, they're the same.
Are they really?
I mean, I use the same materials, the same approach. You know, everything is the same. I can't sort it out as to subject matter. I really can't make a difference. The thing I do have with the portraits sometimes is another voice if it's a commission.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it so interesting. It becomes collaborative, and it becomes interesting. But as far as the painting, it's no different.
So so you're boiling it down to shapes and
Exactly.
shapes and colors.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier you do a lot of teaching.
Yes.
Like how much teaching?
What percentage of the time?
I mean, do you have regular students, or do you do
No,
workshops?
no, I
or-
just do workshops. And
So-
I do some mentoring and some things like that. But it's a fairly small percentage, but it's very important to me. I'm very passionate about it. I've been doing it long enough that I've seen that some little bit of instruction I've done has actually helped somebody, and that's just a great thing.
So who were the artists that changed your lives in teaching you?
Well, I've studied with a lot of great people. My main teacher was Everett Raymond Kinsler.
May he rest in peace.
Absolutely.
What a jewel of a man.
I was painting the other day in my studio, and I could hear him yelling at me a little bit. You know, I said if he were here, he would be saying, "Don't be doing that." You know.
Yeah.
And just an incredible man.
I know this is an impossible question, but we'll give it a try. If you had to boil down to one or two or three things that his voice is always saying to you, what would they be?
Well, I think a lot about honesty in the work and not trying to affect something either for the market or something, but to really make an honest statement, and absolutely to do your homework, to really plan and prepare for every piece. And I just don't know of anybody who worked any harder as he did.
What a joy it has been for me to get to know him, and I know for you. And what is honesty in a painting?
Well, I think sometimes I talk to artists and they say something like, well, this subject matter seems to be selling well, or something that's
I see.
driven from an external source.
Right.
And now, My best paintings are ones that are coming from me, what I want to do.
John Coleman, the famous
Yes.
Western artist, painter, and sculptor, once said to me that if you're going to be doing cowboy art or cowboy Native American art, he said, the collectors know if you live it, if you breathe it, if you feel it, and they can sense the imposters who are there just coming into the market for the money.
And Kinsler would totally agree. He said, you know, if you just put out your best, honest work, and that I think that's what he meant by honesty. You know, really connect with it. I don't live in the West. The cowboy culture is foreign to me. If I had good photo reference, I might pull off something with a cowboy that would be okay on the surface, but it wouldn't have that deep understanding.
Right. Well, I think that this is a challenge that a lot of artists face, is that, you know, a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do I make a living as an artist?
And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and so when the gallery calls and says, you know, those little red barns sell really well, but you're sick of painting those little red barns because you don't want to do it, how do you deal with that internal conflict?
Well, that is a problem. That really is. I like to think I can come up with something that they will like as well or even better than that little red barn. I mean, I am a creative person, and if I can't come up with something that satisfies their needs and feeds me for what I want to do, I'm lacking then. So I see that as a challenge. Now, you know my husband has a gallery. I don't know if you know that
No,
or
I
not.
didn't know that. What's the name of the gallery?
Richland Fine Art in Nashville, Tennessee. And so he said to me just the other day, you know, I really wish, you know, you would paint this or that.
More
or,
little red barns.
You know, little red barn. He feels like if he needs some vertical, you know, are really low on vertical large paintings, you know, what can you do? Well, if he gives me that general thing of a vertical large painting, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
You know, I can take, but if it's paint the little red barn, yeah, I balk at it. I say, well, how can I make you like this even more than the
So there's got to be a little bit of a give and take, because the galleries know what they need, and if you're in a
Absolutely.
gallery, you want to help
Absolutely.
them because your living depends on it, but at the same time, you've got to satisfy your own inner need of doing something new and fresh and creative.
Well, if you get to a place where you're churning out what the galleries say they want and your heart's not in it, it will eventually catch up, and the galleries won't be able to sell them. I think even a viewer who's not trained can feel some emotion and passion and heart in a piece of art.
You have spent a lot of time studying other artists
Yes.
in the past. Talk to me about historical art influences.
Oh, where to start?
Well, let's start with Celia Beau.
Oh, yeah. I have been able to go to a few shows of hers, and a few of her pieces are as good as anything you'll see anywhere. You know, there's not the vast body of work like there are for some other artists, but there's some beautifully crafted pieces there.
Well, today, there probably are more women painting than men.
Yes,
And at the time that Celia was alive, she was a rarity.
she was.
It was frowned, as a matter of fact, it was frowned upon for women to study in the academies at that
Yep.
time. So that was quite an accomplishment. Yet, one thing I hear today is that women still don't get their proper recognition in the art world. Is that something you believe?
I never even think about it.
That's nice.
No, it's not a consideration at all.
That's good.
It never crosses my mind unless somebody asks me, and I'm saying women are winning shows, they're making good living, they're in magazine articles, they're on the cover of the magazine. What's the problem?
Yeah, yeah,
What's the problem?
yeah. Well, there probably is no problem, but maybe. So talk to me about other historical influences.
Oh, well, of course, there's Sorolla and Sargent and Zorn and a million other people. I don't even know where to start. There's so many.
And if you could pick only one to own one painting from one of those artists, which painting would it be?
I can't do that.
It's like picking your favorite child, right?
It's even worse. You know, I am content to get to look at them. So when I first started thinking about painting, to see a painting, I had to buy an expensive book or go to a museum. And now there's so much available online. I can go and look at a painting in a museum, high resolution. I can zoom in a way I couldn't if I were at the museum. And that is enough for me. I don't have to own it
Right.
at all.
You know, it's Google Museums, and they have such high resolution that you can zoom in on a square inch and make it the full screen of your monitor. And
It's incredible. What a wonderful time to be a painter.
do you ever go to museums for inspiration, or do you
yes.
ever look for inspiration anywhere?
I go to museums every chance I get. I love doing it, but I'm constantly inspired. I mean, just driving from your house over to the studio, you know, I'm just seeing all this interesting stuff that's a little different than Tennessee.
Right.
And I think, oh yeah, I would just really love to paint that.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
If only there were time, right?
I'm so inspired by the people around me who are painting. You know, there's so many good painters now. And I was just at a group show at the Booth Museum, and I looked around at the paintings, and I thought, you know, this is really some good quality work. And they're my friends. It was very exciting.
Well, I would say that you're probably very humble, because many and most of those painters you trained. Is that right?
I don't know, just-
certainly, maybe not that show, but
Not that show.
certainly there's some very well-known, become very accomplished painters in the Tennessee area that you have mentored and,
Yes.
and elevated considerably.
I will own that, and I will say to you that that's my best work on the earth.
Yeah.
Although I love to paint, I just happened to be there at the right time for some people, and it still happens today, and that it makes a difference in what they paint.
Well,
And I love it.
I'm not very familiar with the area that you live in and the people who are down there, but from what I understand is that you're kind of the queen bee in the art world down there, in terms of the one that everybody kind of went to learn, and my understanding is that you've influenced hundreds of people.
Well, I've had opportunity to do that. You know, I taught at a university for 30-something years.
I did not know that.
You
What
didn't?
What did you teach?
I taught painting.
You did?
Yes.
And so this was while you were raising your kids.
Yeah. See, I taught 2 days a week. I could do that.
And
Yeah,
yet,
I taught other things too, but when I started to paint, I taught painting. I taught design. I taught drawing. You know, I taught other things.
and so I don't want to put you on the spot, because I know this is a difficult question. I know some names of some people that you taught. I don't know if that was in a university setting, but were there people you taught in a university setting that maybe became well known, not so much as famous as painters, but well known in other areas?
Well, there's some that have become well known as painters, but they're no more important to me than ones who just paint for fun.
That's good.
I mean,
That's
it's
good.
just I was in a position to make a difference in some people's lives, whether it was professionally or personally for them. It doesn't matter too much.
I have a painting in the back of my mind that is the opus, the painting that I want to get done in my life before I go.
Good.
What's that painting for you?
I don't have that.
You don't.
No, never crossed my mind.
You get it done when whatever it is you want to get done, you're getting
You
it
know,
done.
I'm so excited about whatever I'm working on. You know, I'm so excited going into it. And then, you know, at the end, it breaks my heart a little bit because it didn't quite measure up, but then I'm over it so quickly. I'm on on to the next thing, but I have never even considered a particular painting that would be more important than another.
When you teach workshops, people who would be probably at some form of an intermediate level where they already kind of know how to paint, they've already developed some good or bad habits, and now you're kind of teaching them to go to the next level.
Well, that's true for some classes, but then there's some classes where I love to get somebody who's just picking up brush.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh, I do.
So I'm going to ask you two questions now instead of one then. For the person who's just beginning, what are the most important principles that you're trying to get across to them that's not what you're going to pass on to the intermediate people, but that is focusing on how to learn to paint?
Well, at an entry level, the thing that's lacking mostly is drawing skills.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. And the drawing skills gives the new painter more confidence, because I think to the new painter, that's the thing that scares them the most, is the drawing.
And what do you recommend that they do to get those drawing skills?
Well, the short version is just to draw a lot, you know. I know a 17-year-old young lady, and her drawing is impeccable, and I'm with her around other artists sometimes. People always say to her, "Oh, you're so talented, you draw so well." And that's wonderful. But I know that child had a sketchbook with her probably from about the age of 11 constantly, and she has attended to it and you know, draws all the time.
And that was advice given to me by a Russian master when I was over in Russia.
Really?
He said, always have a sketchbook. And I
Yes.
noticed, I spent 2 weeks with him, and I noticed if we were in line at a grocery store or restaurant, he pulled out his sketch pad and was doing sketches.
Absolutely.
And so always be drawing is the first part of that.
You know, if that's the only thing you did, it would make such a difference. You know.
So could you end up doing, 10 years of bad practice, or will your hand-eye coordination eventually get so good that you'll start figuring it out?
I'm going to try to give you a very short answer here. There's doodling and there's drawing. There's a difference. And so to me, doodling is just moving your pencil and making a mark with no assessment of it. And then drawing is when you make that mark and then you judge it. Is this correct? I mean, can you sort of see the difference there?
Yeah, and that's kind of the difference between representational art and modern art as well, in some regards, is that in representational art, you can tell what it is. It represents something, and doodling or some other form.
I can see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that really it's not dexterity that keeps you from drawing well. It's how you perceive things. It's your eyes and brain and how you see. And so if you are drawing with that in mind, so how, I think this bottle is this shape, but if I really get in there and really let my brain work in a different way so I don't see a symbol for a bottle and what's actually there, then that advances your drawing skills.
Well, that's the thing that's hard to overcome is, when we're all little and we think of trees as, bubbles on popsicle sticks.
No, it's exactly right.
Our clouds are, they're all the same. Now, same question, intermediate person. What are the things that you have to work on with people the most, the consistent patterns that people need help?
Drawing first.
Okay. Still the same thing.
It's still there. It's still there, and that's such an individual thing with different people. I'm trying to think in general terms. What I find for the intermediate that's very important is for them to begin to find their personal voice. How they want their paintings to look, how they want them to feel. Goes beyond style. It's what interests you. What's important for you to put down on canvas?
Well, and I was going to ask you that is, how do you get there? I have felt like I've been painting for 25 years and I still haven't developed a style.
Yeah.
That someone could uniquely look at that. So for instance, when I judge art competitions, once in a while, even though I have them cover the names,
Yeah,
I know who that artist
Yeah.
is because they
Yeah.
have that distinct style.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I think sometimes we think about style is the way we put the paint down or the colors we use, and I think it's deeper than that. I think it's finding your intent for the painting, you know, what you're interested in. I have a good painter friend who is only interested in light and shadow. That's the only effect. And her work is very identifiable because of that, because she has perfected that feeling of a light-struck person or an object. And I think it's her voice, her intent has dictated what those paintings look like, and not the other way around.
I just took a workshop with David LaFell and
Yes.
Sherry McGraw, and the one thing that Sherry said is the most important thing that you take out of this is that don't start a painting until you have an idea.
Oh, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So the intermediate students that I come in contact with think that they may be lacking in something technical, and they may be, but what I find most often is they're lacking in that clear intent.
Right.
You know, what's important to me for this painting? And when you find your intent, you find that intent will repeat itself. You'll sort of find the theme that you're interested in. And then your style comes, I think.
So before we wrap this up, tough question. And somebody's looking back in 100 years from now, they're looking back at your life, your career, your paintings. What is it that you hope they'll remember?
I know that's not a tough question at all. I hope that they can identify people that I was able to inspire and help along the way.
Perfect answer.
It's what I really believe.
Great. Dawn, thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been an honor.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Well, we've been with Dawn Whitelaw, the legend from Tennessee, and she's nationally and internationally known, and what a pleasure to have her on. Thank you for watching. I'm Eric Rhodes. Well, that is the great Dawn Whitelaw, and the video is called From Sketchscapes to Studio. And you can learn more about the full-length video at lilyartvideo.com. And remember, there's a discount code in the comments section today only. We're here every day at 3 p.m. for you with video samples of many of the videos that we've produced. And we also have for you for free 97 amazing painting secrets from the world's best artist. You get that for free. It's a $107 value. It's 2 hours. And you get it at 97tips.com. Thank you for watching today. Enjoy your day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Dawn Whitelaw and I want to welcome you to my video workshop. In this video, you're going to learn how to deal with the enormous amount of material that nature presents to you and learn how to sift it down to make the painting very personal. You're going to learn how to give the painting a lot of energy by using a small sketch instead of a photographic reference. You're going to learn things about color. You're going to learn things about value and edges. I've tried to include some unique things in the video. One element are the bonus sections at the end, and the other thing is because I'm a teacher at heart, I've included homework. The thing that would help students paint better is to paint more, I believe. I know that people are limited in their time, but there's nothing that can take the place of miles of canvas. I really didn't start painting until my mid-30s, and I got into it in a very unusual way. I'd painted a little bit, but really my heart was graphic design. But I went to a museum and saw a painting by painter Cecilia Beau, and it stopped me in my tracks. I grew up in a small town, did not see a lot of original art except my mom's. And this painting, I didn't know that paint on canvas could look that way. And I decided at that moment that that's what I wanted to do. I would describe my style of painting as evolving. It's this moving, changing organism. If I had to give you a general statement about my style of painting, I would say that I'm more interested in how things feel than exactly how they look. When we start to paint, we're so obsessed with making a thing look like a thing and getting in all the little parts. That's part of the learning process. But as you progress as a painter, you know, you're painting because you have some sensitivity to how beautiful things are. You start to be more concerned with how they feel, how you emotionally react to them. I really have never been put in a box of being a landscape painter or a portrait painter. The subjects are all the same to me. They're just shape and color and feeling. So I paint everything. On a daily basis, I see random things that I want to paint all the time. I've been painting for a while, and you would think that I would get tired. People ask me sometimes, don't you need a break or don't you get tired? I stay inspired and motivated all the time, and that's the truth. I paint a lot. I love painting, but I honestly think my real work here on the earth is to inspire others. I connect with people. I love talking to an artist, no matter what their level, and trying to find out what they're interested in, what they want their paintings looked in. I love that connection, and I love helping them on their journey.